Good evening. Welcome to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York. I'm Karen Taylor, Program Director, and I'm so pleased to welcome you here this evening. This is the first lecture of our fall, winter, and spring season, so you're very welcome this evening. And we have a particularly special program this evening as we're going to be celebrating 70 years of Penguin Classics. So we're delighted that you can all be here with us. This program is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. In addition to our speakers this evening, I would like to especially thank Louise Braverman, Director of Publicity for Penguin Books and Penguin Classics, Andrea and Guy at Books and Call, and General Society members Kerry and Neely. So thank you so much. For those of you who this may be your first visit, and for those of you who may have heard this before, the General Society was founded in 1785 by the skilled craftsmen of New York City. Today, this 230-year-old organization continues to serve the people of the City of New York through its educational and cultural programs. These include our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, our lecture series, of course, of which tonight is part of, the library, of which, of course, you're sitting in now, and also to mention to you that we have a wonderful museum, our lock collection upstairs, which you can just see. As I mentioned, of course, you're in the General Society Library. The library was founded in 1820 and is the second oldest library in New York City and is one of 3 of the city's remaining membership libraries. And for those of you who are interested, you will be able to find information on library membership at the back of the room. We're also having a book sale, as you may have noticed. This will be continued on Wednesday and Thursday lunchtimes, if you're able to come back. As I mentioned, we're having a really special event tonight, celebrating 70 years of Penguin Classics and the launch of this wonderful book, Classic Penguin, Cover to Cover. Paul Buckley and Elder Rotar, in their conversation this evening, will provide an overview of the innovative covers that have put Penguin Classics at the forefront of the book design world. Paul Buckley, Penguin Classics Senior Vice President and Executive Creative Director, is one of the premier creative directors working today, overseeing a diverse group of designers and art directors, creating exceptional book covers and branding for 16 imprints and countless authors within the Penguin Random House Publishing Group. For the past 2 decades, his iconic design and singular art direction has been showcased on thousands of covers and jackets, winning him many awards and frequent invitations to speak in the United States and abroad. Elder Rotar is Vice President and Publisher for Penguin Classics. She has created and edited several series, including Penguin Civic Classics, Penguin Threads, Couture Classics, Penguin Horror, Penguin Drop Caps, and the Penguin Orange Collection. She's also the editor of the Penguin Anthology of 20th Century American Poetry, edited by Rita Dove, and The Art of Language Invention by David J. Peterson. In 2013, she co-produced and narrated Poems by Heart from Penguin Classics, named one of the best apps of the year by Apple. Paul and Elder are going to have a conversation this evening about Penguin Classics and design. This then will be followed by a short Q&A. But to begin the conversation this evening, I'm going to ask them an opening question. What makes a classic? And how do you decide what you put in the Penguin Classic series?
Thank you, Karen. And thank you, the General Society, for having us here. We are so excited to see you, and we really appreciate that you all came out tonight for this event. I asked Karen to ask this question because it's the question that I hate the most. The reason I hate this question is because there's a little bit of a defense feeling that I have when I hear it, because usually, sometimes the person asking is basically saying, there isn't that much work to do, right? I mean, these were already published before. What else is there to do with something that's been published in the past? And it's as far from that as possible in terms of the incredible team I'm honored to work with at Penguin Random House, especially with Paul Buckley, our creative director. What makes a classic, it's actually the question is, what makes a Penguin classic? And what I want to ask the audience first is, how many of you have more than one edition of your favorite book? If you could raise your hand, I'd love to see. And how many of you have picked up a book at the bookstore or looked at it online simply because the cover was intriguing? Okay, we have our work to do, and this is great. So what makes a classic, or what makes a Penguin classic, is there's a fluid answer to that. I think in general what people assume what Penguin classics are the canonical texts of Western civilization. Penguin has had an excellent reputation being the premier publisher of English language texts, particularly in American and British literature. What we've done over the last several years is actually bringing that expectation and that high quality of publishing to many, many different fields, many different categories. But the heart still is the same as it was when Alan Lane published Penguin books and Penguin classics 80 years ago for Penguin books and 70 years ago for Penguin classics, that we want to make accessible, affordable, high-quality paperbacks for the general public. Now, what you would think is a Penguin classic, I guess, changes with each person here. And I think part of the equation is paying attention to the community of readers that will support a book because they know for their community that this is an important work. And then also generations of readers who have come to the same work and found something very, very special in that work. But what we're gambling with as a Penguin Classic is that we're putting a book out there, either a new translation, an estate that we're working with, new edition with new apparatus, which means new foreword or new introduction, or we make up a collection in-house with our team of editors, and we're saying to you that there is a readership for this, but we guarantee there will be a readership in the future. And that's really where our investment is the generations of readers going forward and what they deserve as readers to read. So Penguin Classics and what makes a classic is something that we think about every single day, and the formula changes, but what we rely on tremendously are the responses and the raised hands of the books that inspire you, the books that make you feel like you're less alone, the books that you remember when you were a student and then you might return to 30 to 40 years later, or the books that you really want to get to. The Wall Street Journal just quoted me this morning about not finishing Middlemarch. I haven't finished Middlemarch yet, but I have liked the chapters that I have read. So the other thing about Penguin Classics is that if you haven't read one yet, we're not judging you, but we will be there when you're ready. So another important part of Penguin Classics is pushing the envelope and embracing what we think should be in the family of our titles. We've been exploring different categories and fields. In particular, we've been looking at sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. And what you see here is really just one of the most spectacular projects that we've worked on recently. What you see here is a Lucite box set of a limited edition of the Penguin Galaxy, which is a sci-fi fantasy series that's coming out this fall with some cult classics in it like Dune, 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Left Hand of Darkness. These incredible books that have never been in our series before. And I'm going to ask our creative director, who really is the mastermind behind the reason why you have too many editions of the books that you love and the reason why you pick up books that you don't know why you need them, but you need them. Paul Buckley will talk about this series, Penguin Galaxy.
Hi, and also thank you for coming out here tonight, and thank you, Society, for having Elda and I here tonight. As Elda said, you have the option to buy many, many copies of any given classic, you can only buy one copy of Girl on the Train. So it's really about distinction. In capital letters, it's a word I cannot sort of stress enough. Distinction. I sort of have to be the grown-up version of the kid that says, "Ha ha, I made you look." I need you to see what we're doing. So when we take something like Penguin Galaxy, I think how sci-fi is generally packaged historically, I mean, probably 90% of the time, is, there's an amazing, unique world inside those pages. So everyone says, let's illustrate that. Let's show the potential reader, buyer, what they're getting inside. One of the wonderful things with the classics is most people who are looking for a specific title already have a sense of what the book is. The books have been around for a long time. We don't sort of have to come at it in a literal way. And if we're going to be distinctive, you sort of have to do the opposite. As much as I'd like to take credit for this, I think it was John Siciliano who, I think in a meeting, when we were talking about these titles, it was his idea to let the titles do the heavy lifting, which we all embraced. I'm not saying there aren't, all-type sci-fi titles out there. I've never seen a grouping of them. So really it came down to finding the right artist for the job, and Alex Trochut was someone whose work I had been admiring for a long time. So even though the Lucite box is just a 500 one-off, the books are the same. The books will be for sale when the box is done. And okay, so what I love about what Alex did here is he created 6 books. They sort of look like the past and the future all at one time. If Dune might be my favorite, but it's almost like someone or some group a few hundred years from now. It's like Art Deco didn't exist in our lexicon or our history, and someone sort of, if it was to be invented a couple hundred years from now, I'd like to believe that that's what it would look like. I love how these have this hieroglyphic feel. They're not entirely readable. I sort of like that too. But I do love how these are all very, very different books. And each book, its contents is well respected within the cover. There is a flavor of every book within the typography that's been done for it. But then with these 6 very disparate books, they really hold up as a grouping. And that's what really good design does, to sort of bring that sort of thread that really shouldn't exist together and show you what it could be. And that's the magic of Alex Trochut. I'd also like to say, designers are also fond of saying we're only as good as our best client. And that would be 100% true with the classics and with Elder Roeder. So even though Elder likes to give me the credit for this stuff, I'm not working in a vacuum. I'm not putting the stuff on the table and then walking out of the room. It's collaborative, and people have to be into it. And the group, Elda, John, Catherine Court, Sam, everyone in that room, they're sort of really into it. And it's sort of nice to work with people who are sort of gung-ho. It's not always the case.
Good. Just an inside look at Penguin is every Thursday we have a packaging meeting at 3 o'clock. And I would say hands down for every single editor who has, each one of us has too many meetings, that's the best meeting of the week. Because we can be like fangirls about design, and we can be obnoxious and say, I don't get it, it doesn't read well. We can suggest some things in terms of art direction, and then they'll take it or not take it. But this actually was a very exciting group of meetings to see how he was going to resolve this, the artist that he was going to find. My particular favorite of these is Neuromancer, because it's sort of matrixy. It looks like someone's hacking directly onto your cover. Is it the green one right there? I also love Dune, too. And with Dune, the conversation at the packaging meeting, I think with Catherine Court, was that the letters were inverted so that it was more of a circular reading.
It used to be that each letter was actually exactly the same shape. And on one level, it really, really worked, but we did pull back somewhat from that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a little harder to read, for sure.
Yeah. But the end result is going to be very, very exciting. And you'll know when you see the books in person that the back of the books have these very interesting symbols representing each of the works. And altogether, it's an incredible project. And definitely a new field for us. You know, the individual audiences that love these books are saying, of course, they should be Penguin Classics, but oh my God, they're Penguin Classics. So we look forward to having them out and sharing them with you. And the next.
It takes a second. There we go.
All right. The Penguin Orange. They're not really animated, but we have a cool art department, and they can do stuff like that, and we love it for social media. So I'm assuming some of you are familiar with the heritage of Penguin Classics and the look of the orange, white-orange tri-band from 1935. We've never used this in the United States, but we are this year. But of course, we're doing it in a Penguin way, which has to do with a slightly subversive, very clever style. We wanted to do this for our 70th anniversary because we wanted to think about our brand. We wanted to think about how people recognize Penguin Classics, but also, as always, sort of a little bit of a twist and make you think twice about what you thought the series was and what we have in store for you editorially. And Paul, do you want to talk about how you came to this?
Yeah, as Eldis stated, we don't do a lot with our branding history. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Penguin UK. They do use our sort of beautiful branding history, and they do a gorgeous job with it. But I think this is the only time in recent history I can think of where we sort of dipped into this heritage and decided to do something with it. Is that good? Can you guys hear me in the back? No. Oh, okay. So when Elda pitched this, is we're going to do these tri-stripes, these Penguin Orange collection. I jotted off this sketch to the right here, because again, it's about how to reinvent this, and it's such a flat, it's really just a couple of panels, and it's a design that Edward Young did way back in the 40s. And it's a beautiful, gorgeous piece of Penguin history. If you Google antique books, retro books, 50% of your Google image finds will be these tri-stripes. I've done it. So it's sort of a lot to sort of take on. So how to turn it on its head, I quickly came up with the idea, this is my quick, terrible sketch of why I'm not an illustrator, of how do we interact and have things come in and out of these shapes? How do we make it a dimensional universe? And enter Eric Nyquist, who is someone whose work, I think he did the Jeff Vandermeer trilogy. Since then, I've been really admiring his work and looking for the right opportunity to work with him. Sent him this sketch, said, can you do this? And he sort of embraced the project and ran with it. The only thing I really changed in any big way from the design, I mean, the typeface changed a little bit, there's a doodad in the middle, et cetera, was I took the blob, and I don't have a term for it, the original sort of shape that Penguin Books is in, and I sort of, liberated the penguin from the oval that it used to live in, turned it sideways and lifted it up there, and I sort of, no one knows but me, but it's a little piece of deconstruction that I enjoy.
I mean, if you're interested in brand history, I think that's a pretty subversive and cool that he did that, because when we were in meetings, we were like, this all looks familiar, but not. And then when he explained what he did with the logo, we were like, oh my God, will we get in trouble? But also still awesome.
It's always been about when will we get in trouble.
Yeah, will we get in trouble? He's always pushing the envelope.
Tired of it, Elda.
I was going to say, so basically we picked 12 American masterpieces from our list, and we put them into the Penguin Orange collection, which is a limited edition. We're only going to have it out for 1 year. And you wanted to show the next?
This is just to sort of show the process. You run into occasionally these people that work really, really hard, even though they're quite popular and quite busy. This is probably 1/3 of the output that Eric did for exploring the snow leopard. And then, once the front is approved by in-house and the state, it is wraparound art, goes flap to flap. So then he explores verso and spine imagery.
In the process, what every editor works with authors and estates is sharing sketches of the covers with the authors or the estates, and hopefully you come to some agreement. And everyone has ideas for how a cover should look, and our responsibility as publishers is thinking about you guys and thinking about how it is best to express a book and how discoverable it could be. We have to think of a lot of issues like, can you see it online? Can you see it from your phone? Can you see it on the third bookshelf? Does it pop? These are things that our creative director and the art department also think about. And sometimes you do have to explain that to authors and estates. But Eric worked very, very hard on 12 books in a very short amount of time, and I think the end result is pretty dynamic.
So this would be the first time we've done 2 versions of something at the same time. You want to talk about why that was?
So I'm really excited that this year is the first time that Lord of the Flies will be coming from Penguin Classics. And I know general readers don't pay that much attention to the publisher of certain classics, but we pay attention to it. And we know that we can do as the best thing we can for this title. So we decided to make sure that there were 2 separate editions, because as you guys know, Lord of the Flies is this iconic curriculum-driven title for middle school, high school level. The red cover is going to be the new cover that you'll see every 12-year-old hold for the rest of their lives. And then the blue one is our Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. So if you're familiar with our Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition, it's high-quality paper, it's deckled pages, it's French flaps. I mean, it's book porn, okay? It's gorgeous. And Paul will talk about the individual artists that we have, but we felt very strongly that each of the editions should be thoughtfully prepared, content-wise and packaging-wise, for the distinct audiences they have. For the red cover, we have a new afterword by Lois Lowry, which we're really excited that she's contributed to both of the editions. And we have a new Suggestions for Further Exploration by Jennifer Bueller, who's the president of adolescent literature for the NCTE, which means that she's one of the leading teachers in the country for works at this age level. And what I wanted her to do with Suggestions for Further Exploration was not to give a dusty suggestions for further reading, but really think about these really crucial terms and issues that people talk about when they talk about Lord of the Flies, especially right now, in terms of violence, in terms of bullying. And she has brought to us this incredible list of not only just other books to read, nonfiction and fiction, but also films to watch, images to study with your students, to give a fuller experience of Lord of the Flies and giving the student more tools to understand and to think critically about this iconic classic. And then for the blue one, the deluxe edition, the porn one, we have Lois Lowry's contribution. We have an introduction by Stephen King. We have historical essay by E.M. Forster, notes from the original American editor, E.L. Epstein, and Jennifer Bueller, again, has done Suggestions for Further Exploration and also an essay about her ideas about teaching Lord of the Flies, because as you guys know, that one of our crucial audiences are the students and their teachers, and we want to provide the best tools that we can for them. In terms of design, you'll see that they're quite different, but they give you the sense of danger. But I think perhaps that they are age appropriate. What do you think, Paul?
I don't know. I do think the one on the left is a little more brutal, but I'm not convinced that teenagers wouldn't love it. So, I don't know. I mean, as a boy, I would have gravitated to that. I mean, it was an interesting challenge to sort of figure out how to ride this line. On the left is artist Adams Carvalho, and on the right is graphic novelist Kiku Johnson. And I don't believe either of them has ever done anything for a young adult audience. But I mean, basically what I did was pick two artists that I really wanted to work with, that I really thought could sort of bring out the tone of this book in slightly different ways. I wasn't convinced that it was going to come out sort of young adult-y looking. It's not my world, it's not our world. I think it did, especially when seen next to Adam's cover. But I think it's just a matter of Adams is really brutal. So it was just hoping that it would work and that Elda would buy it, and she did. So,
I did.
But I don't know that we needed two covers, but you know.
We needed two covers.
It was fun.
And I guess next up we have, as you guys know, we have well, maybe you don't, but we have 1,600 titles or more on our backlist. And the spine of Penguin Classics are the Black Spine series that were, I think, repackaged in 2004 and is the one series model that's shared across the world, across the Penguin Classics offices around the world. These two particular titles I'm really happy to include tonight because they're an example of basically thinking about the canon and shaking the idea of that up and thinking about where readers are, where we need to go. Thomas Ligotti, the scary clown one over there, is one of our really successful top sellers of Black Spine editions that have been out over the last year. I found out about Thomas Ligotti's work from the first season of True Detective because I was obsessed with the first season of True Detective, and I listened to the director talking about his influences, and he talked a lot about Ligotti. I looked him up, and I realized that he had these serious connections to Lovecraft and Poe. He had a very dedicated cult following, and he had early short story collections that were not that available, and he seemed perfect for Penguin Classics. His audience thought so too. They were somewhat suspicious of us, like, why is it in Penguin Classics? We don't need Penguin Classics. But I'm glad that we put Ligotti in, and it's a fine, fine collection of horror short stories. You will never look at a lump again that's like on your bed or a marionette or a clown. You'll just never again will you look at it the same way. And on the other side, we have the story of Han Gil-dong. And our associate editor, Sam Rame, who was my assistant a few years ago, I encouraged all my staff to look out for works that we can put into classics. And I'm very strongly believe that we're as good as the bookshelf is globally. So it's not about Penguin Classics telling you what a classic is. It is about us listening to readers and understanding that there are classics around the world that are important to countries and cultures for a long, long time, that should have authoritative editions, that should have good new translations, and that we should put them into our series. So the story of Han Gil-dong, as some of you might know, is this formative story, sort of a Korean Robin Hood that children learn from elementary school level, and is so saturated in Korean pop culture that there are comics and movies and music videos and even an amusement park based on Han Gil-dong. So we have this new translation in Black Spine. This particular edition is actually growing in popularity with high school classrooms. And I think design-wise, it's offering you 2 examples of what Paul's group has done with our Black Spine series.
I would just add that on the left is artwork by Chris Mars. That's actually, most of his work deals with his brother who suffers from schizophrenia, and that would be a portrait. And on the right is, and I'm going to butcher this name, Sechin Tang.
Okay, so the next, this is a full cover of a deluxe edition of one of our favorite titles by Shirley Jackson, whose centennial we're celebrating in December, The Haunting of Hill House. And this is an interesting story about a packaging meeting, because as an editor, I went to Paul and his team, and I said, we're really excited, we want to do a deluxe edition for the centenary. It's Haunting of Hill House, so duh, put a house on the cover. You could put the staircase. I gave some options. I mentioned some parts of the book. And then Paul came back with not one house. and I don't tend to get angry, right? I don't get angry that much.
No, you're pretty cool.
I kept it all inside. But I was judging.
That's a song lyric. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was judging and quietly said, where's the house? I don't see a house. But then later on, he gave us this final, beautiful, very disturbing cover. And the end parts, and Paul will describe it more, actually are the French flaps. So if you open the French flaps up and you connect them, it's almost this like 360 view of a scene, a very important scene in the story, which was so much more disturbing because it leaves so much to your imagination. And either I called you or I emailed you, and I was like, I get it. Oh my God, this is why you are who you are, and your team knows what they're doing.
Did you notice the body on the right flap?
The what?
There's a little body on the right flap back there.
No, I did. Wait, where?
See?
No, I don't.
You still
Oh
don't see
God,
it?
there it is.
Yeah.
It takes tonight for me to figure out something on the cover.
Snuck that by you.
Okay.
Okay. That's part of my job, sneaking things by Elda. This is the work by Aaron Weisenfeld, who is a fine artist. He's not an illustrator. I don't know if he's ever been commissioned in this way. I was really thrilled when he accepted the job. I've been looking at his work for so many years. Now, I mean, the thing with going outside the wheelhouse and hiring different people that really don't work on commercial projects is you're never quite sure what you're going to get. They also sort of, if they're really eager and they've never done this before, they want to please in strange ways. And this is, on the left there is the first sketch that Aaron did. He was going for the type 2, which I shut down pretty quick. But you can see he's really, really trying hard to be like the perfect illustrator here, which is exactly what I did not hire him for. So I got back to him and said, look, it looks like a classic. We don't want to do this. Hired you to be Aaron Weisenfeld. We don't need you to spell out the scene. I just really, so much of this book, you're left wondering whether, sorry, I have to look at my notes. It's Eleanor. I was going to say Elizabeth. Okay, so you're left wondering how much of this was in Eleanor's head, how much was going on in the house. I really just wanted it to be sort of internal and about her. So we killed this, had him strip it all down. I sort of do love that it is the same figure, the hands are the same way. Instead of holding the mallet, which makes it look like she sort of beat that body in the back, she's holding this letter, which, got us here. And there is a house back there, Elda, on the back cover, like really sort of. Yeah,
I got the house.
You got the house.
Sorry.
And then the piece on the right, which I inquired how much is that, is $8,000 if anybody wants to buy it. I'm not going to buy it. Okay, so that's Aaron Weisenfeld and Haunting of Hill House. So, do you want to?
Oh, you want to talk about the start of the Penguin Threads?
Yeah.
So what we were thinking about, what else can we work on next? And Paul got this piece from Etsy.
Etsy, yes.
This little embroidered, beautiful piece, a portrait of a woman. And he brought it to my office, and he's like, I don't know. What do you think? And I was like, oh, something. We can do something. And then he, of course, went his way and pitched this idea of Penguin Threads. And because I'm an editorial, I did all the copy stuff. So it was about the spirit of handcrafted goods and people that love to get back to knitting. And it was the rise of Etsy at that time because too many coworkers were shopping on Etsy during their lunch break, I noticed.
That's how I found it.
Yeah, all of them were shopping on Etsy.
Except I was, well, anyway.
And so the Penguin Threads were born, and you should tell them more of it because it's great.
Yeah, this was, I was actually searching out two projects at the same time. I was sort of running late on this project, and it's really hard to find people who do this in a way that you could illustrate a book. Now that I'm on Instagram, I see a lot more, but back then, I was also trying to solve the Kerouac backlist at the same time. So I was checking out people's websites, looking for two different artists at the same time. And this is Jillian Tamaki, who is just a monster talent. She's just amazing. So needless to say, I'm a huge fan. I went to check out her work to see if she would be right for the Kerouac backlist, which she wasn't, but I sort of jumped over to her blog, which is sometimes a little more interesting because you see process and one-off projects. And this was way at the bottom of her blog. I think it was like one of her first entries. It was many pages in. It was late. It was this beautiful quilt that she had quilted for herself. And underneath it was a caption saying something along the lines of, "This took forever. Please don't contact me about doing anything like this for you. I will just say no." So I quick dropped her an email and said, "We have these 3 books. Please do one of them. I'll let you pick whatever title you want." And we came in the morning to this gorgeous email that said, "Oh my God, I want to do all 3." Which was kind of crazy because, I mean, I don't know if you can see it from where you're sitting, but the amount of embroidery in there is just crazy. Every little dot, it's all raised. We sculpt embossed them. And she did 3 of these covers, and it's flap to flap. I mean, you're just seeing the fronts. There's a whole other scene going on this flap. There's stuff on the spines, the verso, the other flap. But she hunkered down and in 2 months did these 3 exquisite embroideries. And there was at one point where we were getting on with the mechanical of getting it done and off to the printer, where I noticed that on the back of, she did them on these huge canvases, that one was peeling. There was a piece of white backing on it. So I peeled that back, which revealed her process, which, since she doesn't really embroider, was this gorgeous mess. There was just all these strings crossing each other, going nuts. So if you own any of these books, or if you purchase them, and if you open them up and turn the flap out and look at the inside cover, we then photographed the back of her canvases, so you get the back of this on the book. They're really gorgeous editions. Black Beauty went on to take a gold medal at the Society of Illustrators that year.
It's one of my favorite series ever, and probably one of the few series where I insist that everybody turn it around and see the back of the cover because of what he said about reproducing the back of the canvases. So it's our 70th anniversary this year for Penguin Classics, and I thought that this was the perfect time to celebrate the collaborations we've had over the decade, and also to provide a tool for future creative directors, for art students, for people that love design, for people that would love a beautiful reference book for the next Penguin Classic that they want to buy, and also to provide a stage for our contributors, particularly the cover artists, to give a behind-the-scenes look at what it was like to create individual covers. So this year we published Classic Penguin cover to cover, and Paul can talk more about the book.
Yeah, the book, I have to give a shout out to Matt Varga, who designed this thing just gorgeously. The book is all of our greatest hits from the last 10 years or so. We even have James Franco in there. Let's see, this is Brian Ray showing, I think Brian, those little drawings you see in the margins, I think Brian did literally a few hundred of those. Mary Carr's autobiography here is just so chock full of beautiful Texas imagery and childhood and beer and all kinds of things. And he did all these drawings, and we sort of assembled them together in this fun packaging with a foreword by Lena Dunham. So this is the work of Chris Conesque, who makes his living as a tattoo artist. We had also done a series of books called the Penguin Inks. Chris is one of those people who, he's a bit of a triple threat. He hand draws typography, he does the design, he does the illustration, he pulls it all together, and then he sends it to you in all separate pieces, sort of like it's 1983, and you have to scan them all in and put it together. But what I noticed about working with tattoo artists is that, not to take anything away from illustrators, they've done their 1,000 hours and more, but tattoo artists, all day long, someone's walking in saying, I want this, and then, this type around it, and then the next person is, I want this. So all day long, they are being bombarded by requests that they don't know what the next one is going to be. So they can dance around this stuff like crazy, and I actually think they're the best draftsmen out there, and I think this is testament to that, right down to the 50th anniversary medal. But no one's really tapping into them. You've seen them on like a Camel ad here and there, but no one is hiring these guys, and they should. Okay, Salt Bellow. Do you want to?
Oh, okay, so one of our major estates for Penguin Classics is Saul Bellow, and we were celebrating with a new edition of Herzog, which ended up going through several rounds of different cover designs. And how did we resolve this one?
So Saul Bellow, the top three on the right there is the work of Jen Wang, very amazing designer, and that was our first attempt at doing this cover. Elda, I don't honestly remember if any of those or which of those was it the one on the right that went to the estate, maybe?
Maybe the red one?
Yeah, I think it was the red one.
I like the middle one.
It didn't fly at all.
No.
Breaking up the words, all that, it's just, it wasn't going to happen. For some reason, we shifted gears. I know what happened. Lynn Buckley, no relation, is one of my associate art directors, and this was one of those instances. Editors and publishers are often saying when they're sort of rejecting something or killing something, but I love it, it's just not right for this book, let's save it for something else. And we do our eye rolls because that never, ever, ever, ever happens. But this was actually sort of amazing. Catherine Court, who is Rebecca Mackay's editor and publisher, remembered that little sketch on the lower left-hand side. And when we were talking about what we should do for Herzog, she looked at Lynn, she said, you remember that inkwell you did for Rebecca that didn't fly? Let's bring that back. And this was a case where something like that actually worked out beautifully. Rebecca's cover then went on to be the sort of the stripy linear thing on the lower right-hand page. Okay. And this is the work of Roman Muradov, who sent in a sketch for this, and I quickly emailed him back saying, I love that, but you do realize it looks like the Wanderer of Sea and Fog. And he's like, what's that? And I sent him that little painting down there. And he insisted he never saw it before. I believe him, but I believe he saw it and he just doesn't remember. I mean, the mind's a funny thing. Maybe he saw it when he was 5. I don't know, but there's just no way he didn't see that. Roman's a really, really, really good guy, so I don't think he was trying to pull the wool over. But, you know, we went with it anyway.
And Roman did this also, the most incredible cover for Dubliners for us, and we were hoping to have the opportunity to work with him again, and we were able to work with him on another Joyce. So I guess, you know, in our last words for the presentation are basically coming up with what I wrote in the preface to Classic Penguin Cover to Cover, is the importance of covers in general and what they do for a reader in terms of sparking her imagination when she decides to take this trip with a book, right? So you find a book at a bookstore or online and you look at it and you're curious. I think then when you start reading the book, perhaps you might disagree with the vision that you see on the cover, but yet it is the key. It is the first interaction that you have with interpreting a book that you're going to be reading. And then years later, it's going to be that Proustian Madeline of something that you remember, or the way you used to be, or the way you used to read a particular classic. And I was going to ask Paul, and I'll share one for myself, about an early cover or covers that you remember, classics that kind of marked who you were as readers. I mean, I think one of them for me was the Penguin Classic book of English romantic poetry, given to me by a boy I wasn't supposed to be dating in high school. And I remember looking at this oil painting and staring at it and trying to find meaning that I wasn't getting from the boy himself for like many, many hours. And there's not much meaning in the book, in the cover at least. And then I also had a collected works of Oscar Wilde. It was a Penguin book, and I remember that was my college textbook. What I loved about it was the choice of like a salmon pink, and then a picture of Oscar Wilde in black and white, like right in the middle, and just felt like that was so substantial and so memorable. And lastly, I remember my own edition of Lord of the Flies was the original mass market edition, which was basically like a small illustration of a boy, I think, holding his head, and it was maybe watercolor with a dark red swirl around that illustration. And that really did express to me the trouble I felt, the uneasiness I felt to read a book like that. That was one of the first experiences I had of not feeling safe, not feeling that the world was safe, but feeling that it was an extraordinary piece of writing, and I was glad to have read it. And Paul, what about you?
I grew up in a brick row home in Philly, and at age 12, we moved north to Bucks County, as everybody from my neighborhood did, and to a big, sprawling, colonial 5-bedroom. And in the garage was just a massive Maytag dishwasher box. And inside that box, I mean, I went in there one day and opened that box up, and inside was literally hundreds of just gorgeous, gorgeous pulp novels from the 50s. Those real lurid ones. I mean, technically they were classics. Some of them, Kerouac was in there, Ginsberg was in there. I just remember sitting down and poring over these books the way we all used to pour over album covers. And it was my first connection to, like, wow, these are amazing. Sort of what I loved about them now in hindsight, I didn't know it then, was, of course, this was like Kerouac before they knew they had Kerouac, and the subtitles were lurid and ridiculous, and, you know, they tried to make everything tantalizing. I wish I had those books. That box disappeared the next week. I can imagine sort of a wall of those, just like a strip of a shelf just going down a wall or behind plexiglass. Just, they would look amazing in our apartment. Probably worth a fortune. All gone into trash.
Well, we'd love to hear from the audience if anyone has any questions for us.
Anyone? Okay. I was just wondering if you obviously can't read every single book that comes your way. How do you guys how do you envision something when you have only maybe a summary's knowledge of what the book's about?
It's very true. I cannot read everything, especially when we're doing series and they're landing on one or two lists. You know, again, one of the beauties of the classics is I can go online. I can learn a lot about it. I can learn a lot about it just by looking at Google imaging the cover and see what was done. I'll read articles on it. I'll read a wiki page. I do try to read as many of the books as I can. If it's something I can't find a lot of information on, but I really need to have a very good grasp of what's going on in it so that I can pick the right artist or direct the artist correctly, I will get a book report done. $250. Beautiful book report.
How do you decide your covers versus a physical book versus an e-reader, you know, Kindle? Does it matter when you're designing covers?
No, I think they work across all platforms, but do you have anything you want to add to
No,
that?
I think that they tweak the covers if they do a test to see if it actually is readable as a thumbnail size. If it doesn't, then the art department does have to tweak it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes for the online version, you have to take type that might be silver foil in the real world and make it sort of a pale gray or even white just so it looks good as a thumbnail online. But generally, we don't change it drastically.
There's one over there.
Is that right?
Oh, sorry.
What about the author's estates? Do you ever get any feedback from the estates about what the cover should look like or something like that based upon their knowledge of their descendant?
Oh yes, we engage with the estates all the time, and there are ideas that the estates give us, and sometimes the estates have to have an open mind about what we think is best for the book. But usually we're on the same page. But we definitely have representatives for every estate to look at the books and approve them, and even look at like animated versions of Cthulhu. So it's good.
What about the public domain estates?
No, I don't have to talk to anybody. That's all me.
Yay.
Yeah.
Hi. Very interesting to listen. But I'm just wondering, how do you find the new artist to illustrate the books? And also, second question is, have you ever used a photography artist for your cover?
We do use some photography. My father was a bit of an illustrator, an artist, and art director. I went to School of Visual Arts on an illustration scholarship. I was an illustrator for some years. It's sort of in my DNA. I just really love it. I also think there was, when I was sort of growing up as a junior designer, there was a glut of gorgeous black and white, uberly sophisticated, small spaced out type books. I still love that look. I do it myself on some of the hardcovers I work on or some of the Penguins. But there was enough, and I don't know, this sort of all just happened organically that I began working heavily with illustrators, comic artists. I think I've always gravitated towards people who can do type and illustration, so that sort of nixes photography right there. There was a moment in time where there was a period, I don't know what it was, maybe the 70s, the 80s, actually the full 90s, where you would hire an illustrator, you would get their illustration in, you would have it drum roll scanned or flatbed scanned, and then you would, or silk, you would put your type on it. And what I always found better is working with an artist who has a complete vision, who can do typography. That is Roman Muradov's typography on there. It sort of all pulls together as a piece. And I'm very interested in ways and new ways and old ways of how to do an overall cohesive package with one person. And you really can't do that too much with photographers.
What specific printers do you use, and do you find any printer that's able to execute on your design the best?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Just wondering what printers you use to produce the covers, and if there's any specific printer that you find is able to execute and...
We use an Epson stylus to...
I mean, with printers that print the actual covers.
Coral Graphics, it has 100% of our cover, does 100% of our covers. I'm not so sure, the previous question, I think you asked how we find our artists, right? I think I missed that. My apologies. We find them everywhere. Serendipity plays a huge part in things. Designers, book designers are usually juggling many projects at any one time, and people are constantly sending you emails, they're sending you mailers, you're seeing things in magazines, you're walking down the street, you're seeing things that are, pasted on the walls. You're sort of, if you're paying attention, as I need to for my job, there is just art and designers and illustrators, and I do work with photographers. Photographers, they're everywhere. They're out there, and they're sort of, they're to be found.
Can you talk a little bit about how you guys navigate Penguin UK and the various series they work on, and how cognizant you are of their work, both visually and editorially?
I see it after the fact. I think Eldest sees it well before I do.
I review everything to consider importing into the United States from Penguin UK. Editorially, we work every day with each other. We share proposals for possible new titles for the series at the earliest stages. There are business decisions that are made on either side. If we see a U.S. market for a book, we definitely bring it in. We do take in some of their designed series. I think probably the most successful series we've brought in is the cloth-bound, the classics that are designed by Coralie Bickford Smith with the pattern designs. So there's a constant open conversation, but we definitely do go on with our own series, especially because of rights issues. There are a lot of in-copyright titles that we do not share together.
Thank you.
So, Elda and Paul, thank you, John. I want to thank you both so much for participating in the program this evening. It was really fascinating to learn about this I'm sure this happens in many publishing companies, but it seems to me in Penguin Classics especially, this fruitful collaboration between the editorial and art department, and I think you really brought that home this evening. And I also want to think, not only was it fascinating to learn about the process of how you thought about the artwork to accompany the classics, it was also so interesting to find out what could be defined as a classic. And I don't know about everyone else here this evening, but it was also kind of a reminder to me of all these amazing books that need to be rediscovered. Shirley Jackson, I'm heading in your direction. I mean, really very much encouraged by that wonderful, wonderful cover. So we would like to thank you on behalf of the General Society so much for being part of our lecture programs and for being such an auspicious start to our upcoming 24 lectures. And for those of you who have been here before, you know that we normally make a presentation to our speakers, and I'm very pleased to say that we will be doing that this evening. So I'm hoping this will work. Does it? Yes? Okay. This is our executive director, Victoria Dangle.
And I'll do both of you at the same time, as it's two separate plaques. But again, I want to join Karen in thanking you. And I always say that our lectures very often that when they make it, you look at things in a way you've really not thought of them before. And thank you for bringing covers back to life. I can't wait to get to a bookstore or spend more time in our own library examining the covers. So thank you so much for that. And on behalf of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, founded 1785, we'd like to express our gratitude to Elder Roter, Vice President and Publisher of Penguin Classics, Classic Penguin Cover to Cover, and Paul Buckley, Senior Vice President and Executive Creator Director, Classic Penguin Cover to Cover, for their participation in the General Society Labor, Literature, and Landmark Lecture Series. Thank you so much. But wait, there's more.
You thought you were getting away?
For those of you who have heard this before, we also, in addition to this commemorative plaque, we have also made you both lifetime members in the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen Library. Thank you so much. We want to see more of you.